Music. This happened in the fall of 2021 when I was living alone in a rented townhouse in southern Illinois. It was my first time ever living by myself. And even though I was technically an adult, 27, with a full-time job and a stable routine, I still had a lot of nerves about the idea. I'd just gone through a rough breakup, and I thought the silence and solitude might help me process everything. The townhouse was part of a small row of identical units, kind of plain but clean and quiet, tucked away in a sleepy cul-de-sac just off a rural highway. The neighborhood had that sterile suburban vibe. Lots of beige vinyl siding, trimmed hedges, wind chimes, and mailboxes with family names stenkled on them. Mostly older folk, but a few young families. I didn't know any of my neighbors well, but I liked it that way. I kept to myself. But almost right away, I noticed one person who stood out from the rest. He lived 3 doors down. A tall, heavy-set man, probably in his mid-40s with a scruffy beard and a weird habit of standing outside his house at night, sometimes just pacing or smoking, sometimes doing nothing at all, just staring. I'd pull into my driveway after work around 9 or 10 p.m., and there he'd be, leaning against his porch rail or just standing at the edge of his driveway facing the street. He never waved, never smiled. He just stared even if I looked directly at him. I tried to ignore it. A couple of times I mentioned it to friends or my mom, and they said maybe he was just a night owl or had insomnia, but there was something unsettling about him, like he was always watching but never participating. It wasn't just that he was there. It was the stillness. He didn't fidget or check his phone or shift his weight. He just stood there like a statue. I told myself not to be paranoid, but the more time passed, the more that gnawing feeling in my gut grew. Then the noises started. It was around mid-September when I first heard it. I had just gotten home from work after a long shift. I worked late hours managing inventory at a distribution center, and I usually got in around 10:30 p.m. exhausted, grabbing a bite to eat and crashing. That night, I fell asleep around midnight. At exactly 2:37 a.m., I woke up to a sound I can only describe as metal scraping against wood. At first, I thought I had dreamed it, but then I heard it again. A long, slow creaking noise, like an old gate opening. My bedroom was on the first floor at the back of the unit, and I had a sliding glass door with vertical blinds that led to a small fenced-in backyard. I sat up in bed, heart racing, and listened. There was a pause. Then I heard footsteps, soft crunching sounds, like someone walking slowly across gravel. My entire backyard was lined with decorative rock instead of grass, so you could hear every footstep clearly. These weren't animal sounds. I grabbed my phone and crept out of bed. I didn't have a weapon, just a dull kitchen knife I kept in my nightstand just in case, which at the time felt kind of ridiculous. I crouched by the edge of the window and peeked through the blinds. I couldn't see anything. The motion light wasn't on, which meant either they were out of range or had come in a different way. I dialed 911. The dispatcher was calm, asked for my address, and told me officers were en route. I stayed crouched in the dark, barely breathing. About 10 minutes later, red and blue lights flickered through my front window. I got up, opened the door, and met the 2 officers outside. I explained everything, what I heard, what time it started. One of them walked around the back while the other stayed with me and asked a few questions. The officer in the yard came back and said the gate was closed and there were no signs of tampering, but said he'd write up a report just in case. They didn't see anyone, no footprints or damage, basically no crime. One of them actually said, "Probably just a raccoon," and gave me a look that clearly said, "You're wasting our time." I didn't argue. They left after about 10 minutes. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. The next morning, I went outside to check the backyard myself. That's when I noticed something strange. There was a flat stone about the size of a paperback book wedged under the bottom edge of the wooden fence gate. I hadn't noticed it before. The gate had a heavy spring that made it swing closed automatically, but the stone looked like it had been placed there specifically to stop it from closing all the way. It was subtle, like something someone would do if they wanted to come back later and slip in without making noise. I picked up the rock and tossed it across the yard. I called the police again and told them what I had found. They told me they'd noted in the report, but again said there wasn't much they could do. I asked if they could talk to any of the neighbors or check for cameras. They said no. Unless a crime was committed, they couldn't investigate. I felt like I was losing my mind. 2 nights later, it escalated. At exactly 2:14 a.m., I woke up again, this time to the sound of my back door handle turning. The handle rattled gently at first, like someone testing it, then a harder jiggle, like someone trying to open it. I sat up in bed, heart hammering. I couldn't see anything through the blinds, but I could feel someone standing on the other side. My mouth went dry. I picked up my phone with shaking hands and called the police again. While I waited, I crouched in the hallway out of view. I didn't have a gun or dog, just that stupid kitchen knife.